Hello guys, and welcome to another Lego train showcase. I haven't done one of these in ages, and I thought you guys might like to see a update on my Lego train collection. Now there's a lot of stuff to get through, so let's get started. So this is probably my smallest standard gauge Lego MOC that I've ever built, and it is Strasbourg number 2. I believe she was also built by Plymouth, but I'm not 100% sure. So it's a 7 wide model. I'm doing a bit more 7 wide stuff just because I think it looks better, like 7 and 8 wide stuff. So the cab is 7 wide and is directly on to the running board, but this bit, which is removable because of how it's attached, that's the bit that's off center technically. So I've done this technique where you put, I'm not sure what you call them, the bits with the studs in the middle. So if I put it on studs, it would be like that, and it would be off center. So by doing that, I've gotten the 7 wide cab and the 4 wide normal bit. Obviously the chassis couldn't be 7 wide because everything needs to be to standard gauge. So let's see if I can take this off without ruining it. Oh, there we go. A little bit. Let me just put that back. So again, same technique. So the chassis is also off center, the frame, whatever you want to call it, off center technically. And this bit, because the front, I don't know, I would call it the buffer beam, but I'm not sure what you would call it in America. So that needed to be centered to that, so that's why the buffer beam is attached to the chassis and not the locomotive itself. And yeah, it's a pretty simple design. I'm quite happy with it. I wanna print out some stuff for it, so say Strasbourg and number 2 and whatever. Strasbourg Model Railway Society or club, I can't remember what it's called, has made their own number 2 out of Lego, and it looks good. I just think it looked a bit too wide, and well, I already had number 1, and I wanted to make number 2, and I'll show you number 1 now. If you've watched my Argleton, I forget what it's called. I think it's just Argleton Railway, but this was the little diesel in the front, Strasbourg number 1. So obviously this is my model of it. I've made it. I haven't copied anyone else's, anything like that. This is my own design. This was, I would say, a lot easier to build because everything is centered except for this cab portion, which does have, it's big enough to have a little bit of a interior. So I have an engineer and some controls. So again, the cab itself is off center, and that's 7 wide. I think maybe it's 8 line. Yeah, it is 7. So that's Strasbourg number 1. Pretty easy build. I'm quite happy with it. So let's move on to some small steam engines. So as I only showcase new locomotives in these showcases, I've only ever showed this one off once. You can go back a few videos, find it. Since then I've added a headlight to make it more realistic. That's about it. It does need a bell, so that's something that needs doing. But the reason I'm showing you this is because I made a sister locomotive of it. And my idea, my headcanon, is that these two are little logging engines, and this one is a rebuild, and this one's how it came. So there's a rebuild, I'll put that off to the side. So again, it's pretty simple. It's also quite fragile, that's why that keeps going down. It is basically the same thing. That's the idea, that's the same engine, it's just the pre-rebuild. So I'll bring this in so you can see the differences. So first off, I thought the newer one would have a bigger tank, and the idea is that this saddle tank holds more water than these two side tanks. Next, I thought it would have more of the pre-build would have more of an open air cab, as it's more of a cheap locomotive, so that's what I've done. It's all open air, yeah, and not made out of like steel or something. And finally, as you can see with this engine, it doesn't have a rear wheel, so my idea is that while operating it bounced a lot, so the rebuild, they added a rear wheel so it wouldn't bounce as much. Alright, let's move on to the next smallest steam engine, which is a Porter. I think it's what I modeled it off of, just like a 060 American saddle tank, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's definitely one of my older looking builds. Like, it's not very smooth on the tank. Sorry, my dog's coughing a lot. It's not very smooth on the tank, and the pistons are kind of jagged, and it's not the best, but I'm happy with it, and I think that's what counts most of all. I think it looks good, and it's what I wanted, and yeah, and I'm not 100% sure if, yeah, that piece is not Lego, it's Mega Blocks. I'm not sure if you can see that. Both of them, huh? So, to get the whistle where I wanted it, I used this little piece, which I guess is a Mega Blocks thing. Let me see if I can. There. This piece, which is more of a Mega Blocks thing, I guess, to get the whistle where I wanted it. So, see, it's in the center, on the side of the dome, centered, rather than more forward or more sideways or something like that. And the bell is up front. I thought that was kind of a interesting feature. I haven't seen many engines like that on a tank engine anyway. So once again, I've brought back out my massive consolidation, but it's no longer a consolidation. I thought it was a bit too short to be a consolidation, and it also had a hard time going around corners. I tried loads of things to get it to go around a corner, but just didn't like it. So I turned it into a prairie. If I remove the tender here. So this thing has used up almost all of these little tramway wheels. Whatever you want to call them. So I'll show you why in a bit, but it's more or less the same. I've just changed the livery to be more black and white. It's got a new headlamp and a new general front. I can't remember if the last time I showed it, it had the air compressors on the front, the brake stuff. But it's got this new headlight, which is, let's see if I can get this out. So that's how it attaches to the front. It's a tire and a little clear bit on two circular studs, and that just fits in right there and makes a nice little light, and that attaches about in the middle. It's not exactly, but it's close enough, and that's just to be the little number plate, and that goes right in front. Oh yeah, so this is why it's used up a lot of these smaller wheels, because obviously I have 4 on the locomotive itself and 8 on the tender. I don't really like I don't like buying bits for Lego. I feel like that kind of takes away part of the challenge of making Lego. I mean, if you want something super realistic, yeah, you should buy parts. But if you're just doing it for a bit of fun, then yeah. I also don't have a job, so money is not that expendable. So because of that, I often use these wheels for the drivers, or like wagon wheels, not the biscuit, but the wheels you put on wagons. So I use a lot of these small wheels for like trailing wheels, or just generally small wheels. And if you look at like a bit of rolling stock next to a tender, the tender wheels on a smaller tender locomotive are always a bit smaller than the carriage wheels. So that's what I've done. I've made them just that bit smaller to make them look a bit nicer. And so these trucks are kind of interesting, and this squeals like a mouse on fire. So I think last time I showed this off, the tender was only kind of like this, so maybe that's the tender. It's different now. And also, the cab is no longer 6 wide. I've also made it 7 wide, because I wanted to have it be wider than the boiler. And you can see it's now wider than the boiler just by a bit. Before, the boiler was wider than the cab. And this is probably my most fragile locomotive, just because of how bad the cab is kept on. These bits are really only support now. They're not really that detailed because, well, they kind of, the purpose is to be handrails and to cover up this big old gap here. And you can't really see it from the side, but it's definitely noticeable in real life. Let me just take off the cab for you. That's how I do it. So there's the cab. It's got quite a bit of an interior. I was able to fit more stuff in it, like we got a regulator, a reverser, a firebox that, I guess I can just take that out. A firebox that has a operating door, which I think is pretty cool. I was really happy with that. Injector or brake. There's just a load of stuff I've added onto it. And that is also centered. It's not off center, so it lines up with the boiler a bit better. And then, like, if I really wanted to, I could probably fit a fireman in there, but I don't have an excuse for that yet. Oh, there's the undercarriage. That's my biggest steam locomotive. Let's go on to a kind of interesting thing that I haven't really built before. So this is a completely freelance New York Central doodlebug. Obviously that was more of a Penzi thing, but in my headcanon, the New York Central was like, we want branch line diesel gasoline engines, so they built one. And that's the whole headcanon. So it's a pretty simple build. It's basically it's very similar to a carriage I have, which I'll show you in a bit, but I've just added this bit at the front to make it, like a rail car. Again, not the smoothest model. I'm not that pleased with the front. I think it looks a bit too much like a subway car or something from the front. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It doesn't have any form of interior. I'm pretty sure. Well, I'll fix that. Okay, it does have a tad of interior. It has a engine there. That actually came from the black diesel locomotive that I reviewed in another one of these. And this is obviously the engineer, but I've had to remove her arms and legs so she can fit. Kind of a bad design in the New York Central's part. You should get on that, New York Central. Oh wait, they're Norfolk Southern and they don't do passenger trains. Well, that's not right, but I'll fix that off camera. And I kind of attempted to have a New York Central logo there with a little. It didn't really work out, so now it's just a hole. So let's move on to rolling stock. So this is my first 7 wide bit of rolling stock, and it's also a very bad looking bit of rolling stock. I wanted to build a reefer and a 7 wide something, and this is the best I could do. I don't have a lot of brown, especially not a lot of nice smooth brown bits, especially not curved ones. So it was kind of just a quick put together, and it's absolutely rubbish because if you pick it up like a normal Lego freight car, it just... Well, that one's not coming off. This truck, I guess, normally it's... But, anyway, there you go. They just pop off, so I rarely use it because it's a pain to get off the shelf. I'll probably redesign it eventually, but because so the reason why it sucks is because it's 7 wide, so it's off center. So instead of doing one of the various 7 wide techniques, I've just got a brick layer, and you just put it in a slot and just hope you get it centered. I was lucky that time. See, no, I'm not so lucky. But yeah, it's a pain, but it's okay at best. Next, we'll do the other freight car, because it's simple. It's a flatbed with a container on it. Nothing special about it. This is my new open air car. I've had a few renditions of that green open air car, and this is what I have for my open air car now. It's more of the style of like the Strasbourg's open air cars, where it's really dusty. Should have dusted all this stuff before. It's just like a normal passenger car, but it doesn't have windows. That's it. There's nothing special behind it. There's no interesting story or anything. There's a little shelf behind. Oh, just broke it. There's a little. I put a shelf behind this guy. You can kind of see it. That's it. Now, for the grand finale, another staple of my collection, which is the power car. I've had this for a while. It used to be yellow, and I think the last time I showed it off it was still yellow, but now it's red, and that's it. I might have... So, I'll just go over it because I'm not sure how much I've changed. So, it's red.